Okay, so you sent me some really interesting stuff about India's big push into manufacturing and
Right.
this production linked incentive scheme, PLI.
Yeah.
It really got me thinking about what it takes for a country to kind of reshape its economic engine. Like
Yeah.
back in 2020, 2021, the Indian government kind of put down this massive bet with this PLI thing, and everybody was watching to see what was going to happen.
Yeah. It
Like,
was a pretty bold move. I
yeah,
mean, no doubt about it. That 1.95 lakh crore commitment is a serious chunk of change. Like we're talking about something like $23 billion.
wow,
And their goal was super clear to take manufacturing from like what it was contributing to India's GDP,
mhm,
around 15, 17%,
right,
and take it all the way to 25% by next year, 2025.
yeah.
A real statement, trying to put India on the global manufacturing map.
Exactly. It really felt like a potential economic earthquake.
Yeah.
But here we are, it's late 2024, 5 years down the line.
Yeah.
And the big question I keep coming back to, and I'm sure you do too, is like, did that gamble pay off? Was the PLI some stroke of genius?
Right.
Or did it kind of, fall short of its big ambitions?
Right.
And, the information you sent me really suggests a more complicated reality.
Yeah, it does. When we look at the numbers, like where they are now, it's pretty clear those initial targets haven't been met. The
Right.
manufacturing share of the GDP, it's still just hanging around that 15, 17%.
Yeah.
And like, think about this. You got powerhouses like China
Right?
and even Vietnam. They've surged ahead in manufacturing GDP contributions, 26%, 24% respectively.
Okay.
So, you could kind of picture India in this race, but they're way behind.
Yeah, it's like watching a marathon runner who starts out with like all this energy and then, just doesn't quite keep up the pace.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And there's also this feeling that maybe the excitement around PLI has died down a bit. We're
Mhm.
hearing these whispers, almost like a quiet admission that the original plan isn't really panning out. The government's not saying, hey, here are new sectors for PLI or let's extend the deadlines. It feels like the initial energy has just fizzled.
That's a really good way to put it, actually. It could mean they're rethinking things, recognizing that their first broad approach maybe needed some more specific adjustments.
Right.
But, let's actually dig into the numbers a bit here because they tell a much more interesting story.
Okay.
As of last November, investments under PLI reached 1.61 lakh crore,
Okay.
plus a good amount of production and sales, in total something like 14 lakh crore.
Yeah.
And exports, particularly for electronics, pharmaceuticals, telecom.
Sure.
Actually pretty impressive, 5.31 lakh crore.
Okay, those numbers sound pretty big, when you just hear them like that.
Yeah.
But here's where things get a little bit
Right.
more difficult. When we actually look at the incentives they've given out, the money that's actually reached those companies,
Mm-hmm.
it's just a tiny piece of that original commitment.
Right.
It's like only 7% of that euro 1.95 lakh crore that's been actually paid out.
That's a key point right there.
Yes.
You can announce this grand plan with all this money,
Yeah.
but actually getting those funds to work in a good way, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Think of it like this. You order this big 12-inch pizza, right?
Yeah.
You're really looking forward to this huge meal, and then you only get one slice.
Yeah. I see what you mean.
That limited payout, that probably directly affects how much companies invest and how much they expand.
Makes sense.
So it's like they haven't really fueled this manufacturing engine the way they said they would.
Yeah. It really makes you wonder about those sectors that were supposed to be the big leaders in this whole thing.
Right.
And, the government wants to highlight the areas where PLI seems to be doing well.
Mm-hmm.
They point to these big global players like Foxconn and Apple, and then domestic companies like Reliance.
Right.
And we do see progress with pharmaceuticals and mobile phone manufacturing.
Absolutely. Those sectors really stand out. The growth in mobile phone exports.
Yeah.
That's a big win.
Right.
Going from a couple $100 million in like FY18 to over $11 billion in FY23, that's a huge jump.
It is.
And the fact that Apple is making iPhones in India now,
Yeah.
that shows the policy has actually had some wins in making India more attractive for electronics manufacturing, at least in certain areas.
Right.
And we've also seen a drop in mobile phone imports, which shows they're trying to do more things themselves in that area.
Okay, but then you look at some other big sectors,
Right.
and things aren't as good.
Right.
Take the automotive industry, for example.
Okay.
There was this big 25,938 crore incentive package to push for new tech, like self-driving cars and all that.
Yeah.
But even though investment in this sector has been pretty big, around 67,690 crore,
Mm-hmm.
the increase in sales as of September last year 10,472 crore just hasn't been what they hoped for.
Yeah, what's really interesting here is that gap between how much they're investing in the auto sector and the actual sales increase.
Yeah.
It makes you think, are these incentives actually leading to the breakthroughs and market growth they wanted? It's like the engine's there and they put in some fuel, but the car isn't going as fast as they thought it would.
It's like a car stuck in second gear.
Exactly.
Putting in a lot of work, but not getting very far. And it doesn't stop there.
No.
The solar industry, which is so important for India's renewable energy goals,
Yeah, super important.
is hitting some big roadblocks too.
Right.
Seems like a majority of the companies in the PLI scheme for solar, 8 out of 12, are
Wow.
probably going to miss their targets.
Yeah, the problems with solar, they show you how complicated it is to build this competitive manufacturing system. It's not just about giving money. You have to develop good supply chains, get the right tech, and compete globally.
Right.
If companies are struggling to meet those targets even with the money, it means there are bigger issues going on.
Yeah. And then you have the steel sector.
Uh-huh.
A pretty big number of those approved projects, 14 out of 58,
Okay.
have been withdrawn or quietly taken off the lists.
Oh, wow.
That's a pretty big deal, don't you think?
It is. It really says something. When projects get withdrawn or disappear like that, it usually means there were problems.
Yeah.
Like maybe things in the market changed, or there were regulations they didn't see coming, or
Yes.
the economy in general was going in a bad direction. It just shows you how unpredictable things can be with big industrial plans,
Mm-hmm.
and how hard it is to say what's going to work in the long run with global markets changing all the time.
Now, the government obviously wants to focus on the wins for PLI. They
Sure.
talk about the IT hardware sector as the prime example.
Yeah,
And we already talked about those mobile phone exports, which are pretty good.
right. A good point for them.
They'll definitely say that PLI is changing the game in some areas.
And it's definitely important to recognize those successes. The big increase in mobile phone exports the fact that we're importing fewer of them.
Mm-hmm.
Those are real positive outcomes.
Yeah.
Apple deciding to manufacture in India is huge.
Yeah.
Shows that the policy has made the environment better for electronics manufacturing, at least in some parts of that industry.
But then we have to think about people like the former Reserve Bank of India Governor Raghuram Rajan.
Okay.
He didn't hold back. He called PLI a glorified import scheme.
Really?
His argument, and it seems pretty solid when you look at the details, is that while we are assembling more in India,
Yeah.
we're still really dependent on importing those crucial parts, semiconductors, displays, batteries.
What Rajan's saying that's really smart is that he's focused on how much value is actually being added.
Right.
His argument makes you ask, how strong are India's manufacturing skills, really?
Yeah.
If they're just putting together imported parts,
Mm-hmm.
the benefits for jobs tech and the overall economy might not be as big as if they were making those parts themselves.
Interesting.
It's like when Bollywood remakes a movie.
Oh, I see.
The finished product might look familiar, but they borrowed the main ingredients from somewhere else.
So where does India go from here?
That's the question.
They don't seem ready to give up on PLI.
Yeah.
The latest budget for the fiscal year 2026 gave even more money to the scheme. And they launched this national manufacturing mission with a new set of things they want to focus on.
If we take a step back and look at the big picture launching this national manufacturing mission, it's like maybe they're changing their approach,
Okay.
or at least trying to broaden their focus.
Yeah.
They're talking about supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises.
Right.
Those are the MSMEs. And they want to grow green industries, clean tech, get EV battery production going, even boost toy manufacturing.
Boys,
Yeah.
that's a pretty different focus.
It is. It shows they know that they need a wider and more sustainable manufacturing base if they want to be successful in the long term.
But, you still get the feeling this is a make or break moment.
Yeah.
All this new effort, this doubling down in key areas. Will PLI actually deliver what it promised and become the foundation for Indian manufacturing?
Right.
Or will it end up being a warning about how hard it is to plan industrial policy from the top down?
This raises a crucial point. Can the government learn from those early challenges? Can they streamline how they give out the incentives?
Mm-hmm.
And can they tweak the scheme to actually meet the needs of different sectors?
Right.
If this new effort's going to work, they need to be more specific and targeted.
So to sum it all up, this big PLI experiment,
Yeah.
where India put down billions hoping to start a manufacturing revolution,
Uh-huh.
the results so far are kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah,
They were really ambitious at the beginning,
for sure.
but the reality is things are still up in the air and there's some serious obstacles.
That's a fair assessment. The PLI's journey shows just how tough it is to transform a big and complex economy like India's.
Yeah.
There have definitely been some good things, especially with electronics and pharmaceuticals.
Right.
But overall, the impact on how much manufacturing contributes to the GDP hasn't met those early expectations.
Right.
The slow pace of giving out incentives and the fact they still rely on imported parts, those are big hurdles to overcome.
It almost feels a little satirical, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
a little bit.
We wanted to be this global manufacturing powerhouse, but we're still struggling to get the results we want. Those promised incentives, they were like that online order you can't wait to get, and then it keeps getting delayed. And when you compare how our manufacturing is growing to China and Vietnam,
Yeah.
it's like we're watching this slow cricket test match while everyone else is playing the super fast T20 format.
That's a great way to put it. The difference between what they hoped for and what's happening now, it's pretty big.
Yeah.
The question is, will the government keep investing in this strategy, maybe changing it up a bit?
Yeah.
Or will they admit it's not working and look for other ways to boost manufacturing in India?
And that's the question for you, our listener.
Yeah. What do you think?
Thinking about how PLI has gone so far,
Uh-huh.
what kind of policies from the government do you think could actually work to jumpstart India's manufacturing?
Right.
What lessons can we learn from this ambitious experiment that's still going on?
That's a good question.
It's clear that the story of India's manufacturing goals isn't finished yet.
Definitely not.
And what happens next is going to be really interesting to watch.